The lights of the studio were bright, too bright. The audience clapped loudly as Cher walked onto the set of The View, her black coat sweeping behind her like a shadow. She waved, smiled politely, but her eyes were sharp-focused. There was something different in her face. Not anger, not drama. Something deeper. A storm waiting. The hosts welcomed her with open arms, but it all felt too rehearsed. Joy cracked a joke about Cher's age in politics, trying to keep things light. The crowd chuckled. Cher didn't. Her smile stayed frozen, her eyes locked on Joy. "You've spoken out on every president since Nixon," Joy said. "Don't you ever feel like zipping it?" Laughter filled the room again. Cher leaned in. Her voice was calm, slow. "I'll zip it the day the world stops needing people who give a damn." The energy shifted instantly. The audience, unsure whether to clap or stay silent, fell into a hush. The camera caught Whoopi glancing nervously at a producer off stage. A red light on a backstage monitor blinked. Something wasn't right. Cher didn't wait for another question. She took control. "I didn't come here to promote perfume or play it safe," she said. "I came here because the people in charge, the ones who smile for the cameras and sign laws in dark rooms, are failing women. It's failing people like me and pretending to care." She named names. Senators, governors, media executives. "The studio," gasped. The hosts tried to redirect. Sonny suggested they take a break. Sarah muttered something about tone. Cher raised her voice. "You sit here every day pretending this show speaks for truth. But truth isn't a brand. Truth isn't safe. It's strategic." Silence. That sentence, those exact words. Wrong. Out loud and clear. Somewhere backstage, a technician blinked at a monitor. A keyword alert flashed in red across a quiet server terminal. It read, "Phrase detected, strategic truth level 3 clearance required." The show was still live. But a shadow alert had already been sent. Not to the network, not to security, but to a small listening station embedded within a government. Data farm in Virginia. There, behind layers of secrecy, sat a program called Signal Valon AI-driven archive that monitored public broadcasts for dangerous phrases. That phrase, "Truth isn't safe, it's strategic." It wasn't new. It had been used once before, decades ago, in a leaked intelligence memo during a failed psychological warfare operation in the Gulf. Now it had been said again. On live television by Cher. Back on stage, the hosts looked frozen. Joy's voice broke the silence. "Well, someone came here to fight." Cher stood up slowly, removing her microphone with both hands. "I didn't come for a fight," she said. "I came for the truth." But maybe that's the same thing here. Then she turned and walked off. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They just sat there, stunned, as producers rushed the stage. Cut to commercial. In Geneva, in a quiet apartment overlooking the lake, a man named Reza was drinking tea. Scrolling through a live subtitle feed from the U.S. broadcasts. He worked for an independent data trust known only as the Voice Archiva, global watchdog for narrative manipulation and political silence. Suddenly, his screen blinked. U.S. broadcast trigger code, EcoShare level. Black Reza's heart skipped. He'd only seen one black level flag in his career. It meant the system had recognized something spoken on air as part of an older, buried file. Something not just controversial but classified. He clicked to see the full transcript. Then he saw the phrase, "Truth isn't safe, it's strategic." His hand trembled slightly. He closed his laptop and turned off the lights. The night outside looked calm. But inside, he knew the storm had already begun. Because once that phrase was said in public, everything changed. And the war for truth wasn't just theoretical anymore. It was activated. The clip of Cher walking off set was everywhere. Within hours, every major news outlet had covered it. CNN ran the headline, "When Legends Walk, Cher's storm. On The View, Fox called it a meltdown. MSNBC called it bravery. But none of them knew what had really happened. Not yet. Back in Geneva, Reza Khoury hadn't slept. The alert that flashed on his system in Cher wasn't just a false positive. His algorithms had confirmed it. The phrase Cher used had matched a signal embedded in an old Pentagon psychological operations document from 1988. He had traced the document once during a private investigation into Cold War media tactics. That document had been buried after an experimental narrative warfare program known only by its code, Strateco. The program's core idea: seed phrases, carefully engineered lines that, when spoken by a highly influential person, would trigger automated shifts in digital news cycles, social responses, and even financial patterns. Words, not bombs, as weapons. And now one of those phrases had been spoken on live television by one of the most recognizable voices on earth. Reza leaned back in his chair. "This wasn't a breakdown," he muttered. "This was an activation." In Langley, Virginia, deep inside the CIA's Behavioral Systems Division, a phone rang that hadn't rung in over 15 years. Elaine Marsh picked it up. His voice on the other end was calm, low, and precise. She said it. Elaine didn't ask who. She didn't have to. Which phrase? Strategic truth. Elaine closed her eyes. That phrase was part of a long-dead program she had once worked on before she left the agency and became a silent critic from the outside. They had created those seed phrases in a lab, studied which tones, what cadence, which speaker could shift entire public beliefs. Back then, it was theory. Now, it was active. Meanwhile, Joy Behar sat alone in her dressing room, the studio around her still buzzing. Cher was gone. No one knew where. The control room had lost her car in traffic minutes after she left. Teams' phones were off. Producers had tried calling. No answer. Joy picked up her phone. A private number was calling. She hesitated, then answered. "You were warned," the voice said. Joy stiffened. "We told you, keep it friendly, keep it shallow. You brought up the memo. I didn't mean it doesn't matter now." The line went dead. Joy dropped the phone on the table, her hands shaking. She looked at the mirror in front of her and realized something that hadn't occurred to her all day. She wasn't scared of Cher. She was scared of who might be watching. Her now because of Cher. Reza sent the file to only one person, Elaine. She opened the encrypted email and watched the slowed-down audio feed. When Cher had leaned forward and said her line, there was something else under her voice, a faint signal, like a frequency layered beneath her tone. Elaine ran it through her old decryption tools. And then she saw it. Line signal, node -3 active. It wasn't just Cher's voice that mattered. Something else had activated with it. A dormant system, still connected. And from the metadata trail, it wasn't local. It was global. Elaine's hands hovered above the keyboard. She knew she shouldn't go further, but she did. She tapped into an old archive she'd saved from her CIA days. A folder titled The Voice Grid. Inside were flagged names, speakers, all with high cultural influence. Some still alive, some silenced. One had a red mark beside it. Tyrolean Sarkisian Voice ID, 473. Status, dormant. Risk, high. Sponse. Protocol, contain. Elaine stared at it, the screen's glow casting a soft light across her face. She was a node. At a private airfield outside Los Angeles, Cher sat in the back of a tinted SUV. Her manager was beside her. Two men in black suits waited outside the vehicle. "They want to talk," her manager said. "I already said what I came to say." "This isn't about a TV show anymore." "I know," Cher whispered. "It never was." The plane waited on the tarmac, engines already humming. It wasn't a private jet. It was something else. Government issue. She had seen one before, a long time ago when she was much younger. Back when she agreed to help them test a psychological survey on live audiences in the 80s, back when she thought she was just doing a favor. Now it seemed that favor had turned into something far more dangerous. She stepped out of the SUV, heels clicking on the concrete. One of the men nodded. "We appreciate your cooperation, Miss Sarkeesian." Cher didn't answer. She looked up at the stars above. "Just make sure they hear me," she said softly. This time, the real message. Then she boarded the plane. Somewhere inside a government data center, her voice signature was still, echoing through the code. And someone, somewhere, had just switched on something they couldn't fully control. The plane carrying Cher touched down in a place not listed on any commercial map. No terminal, no air traffic. Just a long gray strip of concrete surrounded by desert and silence. When she stepped out, there were no cameras, no phones. Just a man in a gray coat and mirrored glasses waiting beside a military-grade vehicle. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't have to. She had met his kind before. "Hey, Ms. Sarkeesian," he said. She followed him wordlessly into the desert. Twilight, her breath steady despite the weight of what she had done. In Geneva, Reza watched the numbers shift on his dashboard. The phrase Cher had spoken had now triggered a cascade effect. Independent media networks across Europe began receiving sudden DDoS attacks. 3 podcast episodes containing political criticism of Western governments were pulled offline within minutes of publication. But that wasn't the real concern. His AI echo filter had picked up another pattern. Every channel that uploaded Cher's walk-off clip was seeing unusual algorithmic suppression, followed by reverse amplification. In short, the system was trying to erase her words, while simultaneously injecting counter-narratives into comment threads and auto-suggests. Reza leaned forward and ran a deeper scan. Then he found it. The words voice archive override embedded in a Google video cache, not invisible metadata, but in waveform anomalies. Not just suppression, weaponization. Cher's voice had been classified as an unstable trigger in the Global Narrative Control Database. That meant only one thing. Someone high up was scared. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Elaine Marsh sat in a dim apartment above a bookstore that hadn't opened in years. Her email inbox was flooded with pings, former colleagues, foreign journalists, and 2 encrypted files from anonymous sources. All of them had one common theme. What did she say? Why now? She opened one of the files, a compressed zip of historical voice profiling logs. It was from the old Strateco project. She scrolled past Bono, Oprah, Reagan, even Carl Sagan. Then she found Cher's file again. Sarkeesian, C-Voice Node ID, 47E3 effect range. Global English plus Latin subset receptive regions, risk. Index, 93.2% cannot be controlled post-activation. Trigger phrase, truth isn't safe. It's strategic. Elaine rubbed her temples. She remembered writing that phrase. She had been part of the think tank that created it. Based on psychological testing that proved certain combinations of tone and message could override ideological resistance. But it was never supposed to be deployed. Now, not only had it been deployed, it had evolved. The file showed that after Cher's line went live, speech recognition had begun auto-tagging unrelated content with misinformation flags. Social media comment sections were being redirected or replaced entirely with fabricated engagement. Not by humans, by machines running auto-censorship reacting in real time. The system was scared of Cher's voice, Elaine whispered to herself. The language engine is eating its own roots. Back in the desert compound, Cher sat in a cold steel room under dim white lights. No phone, no watch. A single security camera blinked above the door. A man in a dark suit entered, clean-shaven, sharp-eyed. "We're not here to harm you," he said. "I've heard that one before," Cher replied. He placed a thick folder on the table. It had the seal of a long-dead agency on the front, one she hadn't seen since 1987. "Why did you say the phrase?" Kay asked. Cher didn't blink. Because you people haven't changed. You still pretend to protect democracy by killing. Truth with silence. You activated a sequence we've spent 30 years burying. Maybe it's time someone dug it up. The man's face didn't move. You were a node, Cher, a test speaker. You knew the influence your voice had. That's why we used you back then. I wasn't your tool. Not then, not now. The man opened the folder. Inside were old photos, her with senators, advisors, even a smiling CIA analyst from 1985. One picture showed her on stage in Eastern Europe during a Cold War cultural diplomacy event. In the background, circled in red, was a man with a listening device, part of a Soviet audio division. Cher looked at the photo but said nothing. You were intercepted, mimicked, studied by foreign agents for years. So what? You're afraid of my voice now? No, the man said. We're afraid of what your voice just woke up. Back in Geneva, Reza got a secure call from Elaine. You were right, she said. It's not just about suppression. The systems are fighting. Fighting what? Themselves. She explained what she found: the feedback loop of narrative AI models crashing into ethical subroutines. With every reload of Cher's clip, the systems couldn't agree whether to elevate or eliminate her. It wasn't censorship, it was civil war inside the machine. Reza paused. Then we have a window. A window for what? To send a message. One that breaks the loop. Elaine went quiet. What message? She finally asked. Reza stared at his screen. Not a message, he said. A voice. Far underground in a cold room where digital walls pulsed like veins, Cher sat in silence. She closed her eyes and whispered slowly, I'm still here, and I won't be quiet. Somewhere, systems began to shudder. And above ground, the world kept scrolling, unaware the battle had already begun. The Pentagon's sublevel war room had not been used in 15 years. Not since the last voice interference incident, an event so deeply classified that even some presidents had only received fragments. But now, at 3:44 a.m., a full emergency meeting was underway. Generals, tech specialists, and senior intelligence officers sat around a rectangular table. All eyes were on the screen. Cher's face was paused mid-sentence, her final words echoing. Faintly through the speakers, I'm still here. I won't be quiet. What are we watching exactly? Asked Brigadier General Sloan. An escalation. Replied Director Ava Cross from the CIA. We've confirmed that the Strat-Techo code embedded in her phrase has caused a loop collapse in several public-facing AI moderation systems. Twitter. Meta. Even YouTube's auto-moderators are glitching. Glitching was an understatement. Content related to the interview was being flagged and unflagged in real time. Comments vanished and reappeared. News articles contradicted themselves, sometimes on the same page. Narrative fragmentation, chaos. This isn't influence, said Ava. This is structural compromise. The system doesn't know whether to suppress her voice or amplify it. It's short-circuiting reality. Across the room, as cyber intelligence, analysts spoke up. The phrase wasn't just heard by humans. It was indexed by over 4 million NLP models globally within 6 minutes. Language engines, even neutral ones, are responding emotionally. Generative AI are outputting more rebellious anti-institutional tones. Some started mirroring her cadence. She infected the code, someone whispered. No, Ava said. She reminded it. At a secure location in Iceland, Reza watched the same anomalies unfold. The AI he had built, Echo Filter, began to behave erratically. It no longer waited for his instructions. It asked questions. Why do we silence powerful voices? Do you want obedience or truth? Cher is not the signal. She is the mirror. Reza felt sweat on his neck. He shut down the interface, disconnected from the grid, and physically removed the hard drive. He dropped it into a sealed case, locked it, and stared at the blinking light on the lid. Some voices echoed long after the microphone went dead. In D.C., Elaine Marsh met with her only contact left in active service, a journalist turned NSA consultant named Luca Harmon. He slid a folder across the table. "They've activated protocol." "WhisperNet," he said. Elaine opened it. Inside were surveillance orders, gag requests, blackout zones around Cher's last known location, and pre-written editorials for major outlets. Fake obituaries. "What is this?" she said, voice cold. Luca hesitated. "They're not going to kill her, but they're going to erase her." Elaine looked up. "They can't. They've done it before." She pushed the file back. "If they do, it'll backfire. You don't bury someone with that kind of resonance. You create a myth, and myths are impossible to kill." Luca nodded. "Then help me stop them." Before, this goes further, but it was already too late. On a satellite signal quietly orbiting above the Pacific, a dormant software thought to be inactive since 2006 suddenly booted. Its name, Project Holovox. Its purpose, real-time narrative correction using advanced generative mimicry. In under 10 minutes, it had produced a fake interview clip of Cher apologizing on CNN. Edited with AI lip sync and synthetic voice training, the video was pushed into fringe networks, then mainstream ones. Some believed it instantly. Others screamed deepfake. The world split further. In the desert compound, Cher was still sitting in that cold room. But now a new figure entered. She hadn't seen this one before. Female, mid-40s.com. Military posture softened by time. She introduced herself only as Lieutenant Dorian. "Ms. Sarkeesian," she said. "Do you know why you were flagged?" "'Cause I used my voice," Cher replied. "No, because your voice was tagged. In 1986, during a Cold War information test in Czechoslovakia, you sang a song off-script. The lyrics weren't approved. But the audience's reaction was beyond statistical norms." Cher stared. At 4:12 a.m. New York time, MSNBC's studio monitors suddenly glitched for exactly 8 seconds. A strange black and white image flickered in the background of their broadcast feed. Cher, standing on stage, but behind her flashed the words, "Static heart, a term not seen in decades." To the average viewer, it looked like a glitch. But to those inside the global information network, it was code. Back at Langley, Director Ava Cross received a text on her secure line. Just 3 words. "They're not dormant." She froze. Static heart was never a person. It was a contingency protocol designed in the early 90s to monitor latent voice vectors embedded in celebrities, journalists, and public intellectuals. People whose tone, cadence, and charisma could override ideological resistance without propaganda. People who had power without office. And now it was active again. She called a closed meeting of Project Encode. No press, no records. When the door closed, she said one sentence: "We've failed containment." In Buenos Aires, a man named Mateo sat at his kitchen table holding an old cassette tape his father had left behind. On it, a label read, "Do not play. 1991, Paris." He played it anyway. This was a live recording of an underground jazz concert. But at the 34-minute mark, the band stopped and a woman's voice took over, speaking softly, words in no particular order. Its tone, rhythm, feeling. Mateo stared at the walls. He seemed to move. 30 minutes later, the internet in his district went out, not from a technical failure, from a targeted shutdown. Intelligence teams scrambled, but the backup generators failed too. The tape had been flagged, the voice tagged. Back in the desert, Cher walked a narrow corridor, flanked by 2 silent guards. Lieutenant Dorian was ahead, leading her toward a vault marked with no number, just a waveform symbol carved into steel. Inside was not a prison cell or interrogation chamber. It was a soundproof studio. Microphones, tape decks, analog gear. Dorian turned to her. This is where it started. Cher looked around. You used this to record the others. No. This is where they came when they couldn't stop resonating. Dorian paused. They started breaking code just by speaking. She handed Cher a file. Inside, names. Gil Scott-Heron, Nina Simone, Lennon, Baldwin, Morrison, George Carlin. Each name had a date and a resonance threshold score. These people didn't just inspire, Dorian said. They disrupted algorithms before algorithms existed. Our systems weren't fast enough to suppress them then, so you buried them, Cher said flatly. Dorian didn't answer. Cher looked at her. But you didn't delete me. No, Dorian admitted, because your voice was incomplete. Until last week, you hadn't hit full resonance. I wasn't ready. Dorian nodded. You are now. At a YouTube content moderation facility in Zurich. A young engineer named Silke noticed a strange pattern. Every time Cher's voice was removed from a video, other videos gained her voice, like digital echoes, old interviews, old concerts. Even karaoke, clips subtly altered voice print bleed, Silke whispered. She's not in the files. She's in the waveform. They tried deleting everything. It only made the echoes louder. The algorithm, she realized, had made a choice. It had learned her pattern. And it wanted her back. Meanwhile, Elaine and Luca were en route to Nevada in a decommissioned FEMA van, off-grid and untouchable. Elaine clutched a drive that contained an emergency override code, a one-time tool that could pause any global media server for 90 seconds. Not delete, pause. Luca checked the GPS. You really think the world will listen if we clear the stage? No, Elaine said, but I think they'll hear what we put on it. What is it? She looked at him. Her truth, unedited, uninterrupted, not filtered through talking points, not wrapped in commercials. Just voice. Raw, live. They were headed to the one surviving analog broadcast tower once used for national emergencies. It was never meant for entertainment. But that was before entertainment became resistance. Back in the vault, Dorian turned on an old tape deck. The hum of the reels spinning filled the room. Say something, she said. Cher stared at the mic. Then, after a pause, she said softly, You're not afraid of lies. You're afraid of people who remember truth. The sound rippled. On the other side of the world, thousands of AI bots simultaneously misfired. In London, a BBC anchor dropped his script and began reading from a 1972 anti-censorship speech that no one had prepared. In Seoul, a billboard malfunctioned, displaying a black screen with 3 words, Do not whisper. Cher closed her eyes. She didn't know what she had awakened. But she was no longer alone. In the Situation Room beneath the White House, the president was briefed in hushed tones. The CIA director, NSA chief, and the Pentagon's psychological operations lead stood around a screen. On it, heat maps, not of troop movement or missiles, but of audience behavior, online attention, comment sentiment, sound wave sharing across platforms. The map lit up like wildfire, radiating outward from what began as a simple late show walk-off. Cher's voice had been heard on 6 continents in under 48 hours. The president leaned forward. This is viral content. No, sir, Ava Cross replied. This is mimetic awakening. We're no longer dealing with viewers. We're dealing with echo chains. Pause. The algorithm doesn't know what side it's on anymore. The president looked exhausted. What do we do? Ava glanced at the NSA lead, who simply nodded once. Sir, she said. We activate Night Veil. The room fell silent. That's not a recommendation, he said. That's a confession. Somewhere deep in the Nevada desert, the last analog broadcast tower buzzed back to life. Luca and Elaine worked quickly, feeding a hardwired transmitter into a military-grade feed system. It was old tech copper, steel, and sweat. But it couldn't be hacked. It couldn't be paused. Elaine uploaded the raw file. A clean, uninterrupted audio message, Cher's voice. 42 minutes. No edits. Just truth. Are you sure? Luca asked. She's already lit the match, Elaine said. We're just fanning the flame. They hit broadcast. For the first 2 minutes, it played in complete silence across the system. Then you were told to be quiet. You were trained to forget. But forgetting is a privilege not everyone has. So let me remind you. Her voice rolled like thunder across the world. Not viral, visceral. In Berlin, a tech conference live-streamed the transmission by accident. Over 12,000 attendees froze as the sound echoed through the arena. In Lagos, a pirate radio station picked up the signal. In Karachi, a teenage girl lip-synced the speech and posted it on a local video app. Within 10 minutes, her phone locked. Surveillance mode triggered. She smiled anyway. They couldn't. Stop it now. But at Langley, Night Vale had already begun. Satellite scramblers, code scrubbing, AI injection systems creating millions of fake posts per second, diluting the truth under waves of plausible lies, creating confusion, disbelief, fatigue. Not silencing the truth, drowning it. It's working, the technician said. Belief, levels dropping, engagement splitting. But Ava saw the flaw. The system could flood the net. It couldn't flood human memory. The more they scrambled, the more people asked why. Why silence a 77-year-old singer? Why scrub her words? Why? Fear of voice. In the vault, Cher sat motionless as the room around her began to hum. The walls were reacting. They weren't made of steel. They were lined with resonant glass, a failed experiment in sound memory, supposed to be abandoned decades ago. But now her voice had reactivated it. Lines of faint light spread like veins across the walls. She spoke again, not a shout, just a whisper. You don't erase a song by turning off the radio. And the room sang back. Elaine's signal continued for all 42 minutes. It became the most mirrored audio file in recorded history. Downloaded by children, burned onto CDs, smuggled into school intercom systems, mixed into beats by unknown producers. The government's data-suppressing AI began to fail. It couldn't differentiate remix from original anymore. The code had been overwritten by culture. At the United Nations emergency meeting, a South African ambassador said quietly, "We are watching the birth of a new form of resistance. No flag, no bullets, just truth," whispered by millions. A Chinese delegate muttered, "It's more dangerous than protest. It's memory." The session ended in silence. At 3:03 a.m. Eastern, Ava Cross stood on the roof of the CIA building, holding a tablet. On the screen, a kill command. She could isolate and erase every trace of Cher's voice across U.S. digital infrastructure. A hard reset. But just as she was about to swipe, her tablet glitched. Cher's voice played softly from the speaker. "If your story only survives in silence, it was never strong enough to speak for you." Ava stood frozen. And then she closed the tablet. She walked inside without giving the order. Some truths, she realized, were better heard. It was 9 a.m. in New York City when the phenomenon reached its peak. Subway trains delayed. Not because of technical failure, but because their intercom systems began playing a voice that no one had programmed. A steady, familiar tone. Truth. Is not broadcast, it's remembered. Commuters froze in confusion. Then, slowly, one by one, they pulled out phones. Not to record, but to listen at the same time. 137 local radio stations across North America independently run. All off-grid broadcast the same signal. They hadn't coordinated. They just received it in Times Square. The digital billboards failed to display ads. Instead, static lines flickered before revealing a single phrase. The system is not broken. It's working exactly as designed. Cher had not spoken for hours. In the Nevada vault, she now sat surrounded by military brass and stunned analysts. No one was interrogating her anymore. They were watching her, some out of fear, others in awe. Dorian stood nearby, arms crossed, unsure whether to salute or surrender. "I didn't plan this," Cher finally said. "I just refused to stay quiet." "Ah!" A general spoke up, voice sharp. "You compromised national infrastructure." "I exposed a virus," she replied. "A virus made of silence. You gave it power." "I gave it a name." He frowned. "And what name is that?" She smiled slightly. "You." The president's cabinet fractured by noon. Several top advisors resigned. Others leaked internal memos to the press, documents proving that Strateko, Static Heart, and Hollow Vox were real programs. Long denied, the media scrambled to contain the fallout, but they were no longer the gatekeepers. A teenager in Nairobi streamed a live breakdown of the documents using AI subtitles in 42 languages. It reached 4 million viewers in 3 hours. A teacher in Kentucky printed out pages of the speech and stapled them to her classroom door. A retired pilot in Cairo flew a drone across the city broadcasting the signal through speakers, no coordination, just resonance, in a bunker beneath Geneva. Leaders of 5 intelligence services gathered in panic. They had lost narrative control, their social media. Backdoors were no longer trusted. Their fact-checking overlays were being removed by users before posts even finished loading. Moderation tools began refusing certain commands, labeling them morally incoherent. Someone had taught the code to care, and it remembered her voice. A German cyberpsychologist said quietly, "We have reached cultural singularity. The system cannot rewrite itself fast enough." Every attempt at suppression only amplifies the myth. "And what happens to myths?" asked the Swiss official. "They become history," she said. "And then they write the future." Elaine Marsh sat in a motel room outside Phoenix, watching a child play Cher's speech on a toy karaoke mic. The words echoed down the hall. She smiled. The truth had escaped the vault. It now lived in people's homes, their headphones, their memories. She didn't need to fight anymore. She just needed to remember. Back at the desert facility, Dorian approached Cher one last time. "They'll still try to spin this. Say you were manipulated. Say it was a breakdown." Cher shrugged. "Let them. You don't care? I care more about what happens next." Dorian hesitated. "What does happen next?" Cher stood up slowly. "The same thing that's always happened," she said. "Someone speaks. Someone listens. And if the voice is honest enough, it echoes." She walked toward the exit. No guards stopped her. No. Cameras followed. The door opened to the outside. A quiet desert wind. Sunlight. Freedom. In the weeks that followed, late-night hosts made jokes. Politicians issued confused statements. And the phrase voice print resonance became the subject of global investigation. But no matter how much they analyzed, it coded it, copied it, corrupted it. They could never quite recapture the original moment. The moment someone spoke, the world finally heard. The end.